Here's my video for the Grin It to Win It contest. I'm here to talk about this electric bike build. When I set out to build this bike, my requirements were that I wanted a bike that could replace car trips, commuting, grocery runs, picking up kids, taking my hockey gear to the rink. This meant I needed a cargo bike. Living in a hilly area, it also needed to be electrified, and I didn't want it to be too large. So I started looking into mid-tail cargo bikes. This led me to the Mongoose Envoy, an inexpensive mid-tail bike with low specs and a low price. So my first attempt at electrification was to get an older EZ kit. This was from back when Grin was called the Renaissance Bicycle Company. It had an older Cycle Analyst 2.2 and a square wave controller. It was a straightforward and pretty basic setup. I also had to make some bike carrying modifications. It came with 2 narrow panniers, but no way to carry kids. I had to add wood for the seats and the foot platforms and protection for their feet from getting into the tires. A couple of rad runner guards protected their feet, and a Yuba ring finished off the handlebar for the kid's seat. So the first build was just the front engine. Pros and cons for this build. The older controller was not sine wave, so the motor made quite a buzz, and the operation was not overly smooth. This model had no ability to add pedal assist, and it had very limited abilities to customize the settings. However, the front wheel kit was really easy to install, and it was quite powerful. Probably too powerful. While loaded up on any loose or wet steep terrain, the front wheel would skid out. This led me to my second attempt. Electrification number 2. I decided that I wanted a rear hub motor to avoid the skidding. Since I already had the front installed, I thought I would attempt a 2-wheel drive setup. Although it's more complicated, having 2 motors stays cooler. Each motor stays cooler. And if one motor or controller fails, you can most likely get the other one up and running to get you home. I got a Bafang GO2 geared rear motor kit and installed it in the back. I bought a wire Y splitter from Grin to split the power from the battery to each controller. To make a single throttle run both controllers, I split the wire from the throttle and spliced it back to both controllers, only connecting one of the red 5 volts. This worked, but when I hit full throttle, the Bafang controller would throw a fault. After poking around, I found out that the Grin throttle puts out more voltage than the Bafang system could handle. Keeping my finger off full throttle solved this problem. So, pros and cons of electrification number 2. The bike now had better traction, far more torque on the hills, and the dual displays were unfortunate, and there was an increased wiring and weight. And I really started to notice that weight when braking and going through brake pads. Electrification number 3. I decided, this was definitely the biggest change of the 3. I decided they only wanted to have one display. I wanted to have regenerative braking to help with the brake wear. I decided to get the Cycle Analyst 3.1 for more control and pair them with 2 phase runners. One's in the red bag, one's attached to the frame, and the direct drive motor for the rear, which would allow regenerative braking. Hooking up the front motor to the new setup was pretty straightforward. Grin offers cables to hook up older style motors with the new phase runners. The biggest issue I had was tuning the motor with the phase runner software suite. During the spinning test, the motor would vibrate and shake and throw a fault and fail. Searching forums at Endless Sphere, a fantastic website if you're trying to solve problems with your setup, led me to change the feedback bandwidth in the tuning section, the PLL bandwidth and damping in particular. Changing these values got me through the spin test and up and running. For the rear wheel, I went with the Muxus 305 direct drive motor, 3005 direct drive motor. There were a few challenges with this motor. It has a 135mm axle opposed to the standard a 138mm axle opposed to the 135 standard, which made installing challenging. As you can see, the Mongoose rear frame is boxed all the way around. So spreading out the frame was quite difficult. Also, the space between the disc rotor and the side cover is limited, only 15 millimeters. It would not fit a Magura MT5 caliper. But based on the PDFs and CADs that Grin gave on their website, it looked like a 203 millimeter rotor would put the brake calipers just far enough to clear the casing. And as you can see, hopefully you can see, it barely does. When setting up a dual motor system, you want to make sure that one motor isn't doing all the work. You can do this by changing the settings on each controller in the Phase Runner suite. You can verify how much output each motor is getting by connecting the controllers to an Android phone with the Phase Runner suite and adjusting the settings until you reach the desired output to each motor. One of the more challenging things was setting up the regeneration. Initially, I wanted throttle to go forward and a separate throttle to start proportional regeneration. I thought I could do this by connecting the blue and the green cables that are shorted together coming out of the Phase Runner and adjusting some of the parameters on the controller. I was unable to figure this out. You probably can't see, a little bit of a green wire stub in there. I was unable to figure it out, so I thought I would go with the pedal assist sensor regeneration by backpedaling feature that Grin offers in their firmware 3.2b. After hooking it up, regeneration still wasn't working for some reason. It turns out that I had separated that blue and the green wires and never connected them back together. Regen will not work if these wires are not connected. That took me a long time to figure out. I live at the top of a steep hill, and when I would leave the house with a full battery and try to use regenerative braking, I would either exceed the limit set by the Phase Runner suite or trip my BMS. The solution for this is to get a Stadiator charger and limit the charge of your battery to 85%. That way, as soon as you hit the hill, it can safely charge the battery up. This also will prolong the life of your battery. So the pros and cons of this third electrification: the single display is nice. The Cycle Analyst 3.1 is great with all of its customization. The direct drive motor in the back is much quieter. The cons are that the rear motor is a fast wind, so the torque is lower and has higher speeds, which isn't ideal for a cargo bike. And the regeneration of this motor isn't nearly as strong as the 9C motor that I have on my other build. Some other upgrades I did to the bike were to replace the very poor mechanical disc brakes. As I talked about earlier, I have the Magura on the back, and I have a set of Shimano hydraulics on the front. I also added the 1900 lumen light, and I was given by an old Grin employee a light setup that they don't use much anymore, including the ability to use these as a turn signal. Left or right. So what's next? I'd like to replace the 48 LiFePO 12 amp battery with a larger capacity battery. I'd like to add a torque sensor, and I'd like to change the front motor to a direct drive as well. Otherwise, this bike has met its needs. It's replaced multiple car trips. It's able to shuttle kids around, pick up groceries, and even take my hockey gear to the rink. I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully it's inspired you on your next e-bike build. Until next time.